Bullony basketball.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. Here today with a unique episode, I will say. It's just me. It's been a minute since it's been just me. And on some of my social media platforms, I put everywhere to ask me questions about the NBA right now, or just random NBA questions, really. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to just respond to a decent amount of them. So that's pretty much going to be the episode. It's just going to be me answering questions. Could be based on this season or like the NBA in entirety. So let's just hop right into it and get right into the first one here. So I think a good one to start off with comes from my guy Hoop Talking. He asked me, what are my top 5 players so far in the NBA this season? Now, if I'm basing it on production and what I see from each of these players this season alone, probably what would be my all-NBA first team if I'm constructing it. You'd probably have someone like Shea, you'd have Donovan Mitchell, you'd have Luka, you'd have Kawhi, and you'd have Jokic. I think that's the 5. However you want to rank them, you can do that however you wish. Now, there's other people too that should definitely be in the conversation. I think probably the biggest one would be like Cade Cunningham, because the Pistons have been insane this year. However, I do think maybe all 5 of these people have been a little bit better as an individual, but I think you can't understate what he's doing as well, impacting his team, leading him to wins. Of course, Wemby's going to be in that conversation. I do think that he's just missed a decent amount of games that it's really hard to put him up there in the top 5 for this season. Anthony Edwards is another one. I would probably even have him over Wemby so far this season because of that reason. And then, of course, the big one that's like, well, where's Giannis? Well, if we're talking about this season alone, I don't think Giannis should be in the top 5. He's already missed too many games that he can't even qualify for All-NBA. So I would say that he misses the cut so far this season. If we're talking about best player in the league, he's very much in that conversation. He's probably a top 3 player in the world. But this season alone, I wouldn't really put Giannis in that conversation. My guy, Jay, NBA Addict TV, he's asking me, what guards do I want to see on the Bulls next season? So the obvious one, Josh Giddey. I obviously want to see Trey Jones still on the team. I still want to see Colin Sexton on the team. I think that it was a good acquisition. I was just a little heartbroken at the fact that we traded Kobe White for Colin Sexton, and it's like, feels like we maybe took a slight step back, or it's like we didn't really need to do that. You know what I mean? And I would also still keep Jaden Ivey around. I know that it's very negative right now, but this guy's only like 23, 24 years old. We've seen the potential that he has. I don't want it to be one of these stories where it's like he's completely given up on himself, because I don't know if you guys have heard, but he had like a post-game moment where he said, I'm not the J.I. that I used to be. And that's kind of sad. I don't want him to like lose his confidence and be like totally a shell of himself. I still think that he has that somewhere in him. Just last season he was pretty good before the injuries, and then it just hasn't really looked as good since. I still think that he has that somewhere in him. As for like the other guards on the Bulls, like most of them are probably expendable. I think Anthony Simons would be like the best guard that I wouldn't have on here. The only reason why is I just really don't think that he will be on the team next year. We could probably make a play at like maybe one other guard in free agency. I think maybe looking at Jamal Shed for Toronto. I think Craig Porter Jr. would be an interesting one. Maybe even like Brandon Williams from the Mavericks. Like these are some extra guys who it would be nice to have on the team, whether they're playing like a backup role. And in the event that Jaden Ivey is like a shell of himself, then we have another guy who can fill in right in that spot. So it's like we have 4 or 5 guards maybe, but it's way better than like the current situation we have where we have like 8. Speaking of my Bulls, my guy Roundball Renaissance is asking me, is there an ideal big fish in Chicago that we should go for? It's interesting this question is asked right now, because I feel like before the trade deadline, I was all in on saying, hey, whatever we can do to get Giannis, if we had a core of Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Zealous, and Trey Jones, maybe even keeping Jalen Smith, and then bringing in Giannis, And most of those guys are still on the team. The only exception is Kobe White is now Colin Sexton, right? So I do think it becomes a little bit more unlikely though, just because we traded so much away. We're such a young team. I don't know if Giannis is going to be looking at us like that. It might be a little bit more of a fairy tale dream at this point. But there was a point in time when we played them in the playoffs, the Bucks, even when the Bucks were better than us. He said, I could see myself playing for Chicago or, playing on the Bulls one day and everything. So I always leave out hope for that, especially because it is close to Milwaukee. safety. You know, these are some other factors where it's like if he does want to relocate to a new team, but he doesn't want to be too far away from like where his family is or anything. Chicago, Minnesota, like these are probably the teams that are most feasible for him to do it. Maybe even Cleveland. I know that they said they're going to make a push for him as well. So these are probably those teams. After that, maybe like Kawhi, looking at him, but I also don't think that's really likely. I mean, it seems like if Kawhi were to leave, it'll probably be a West Coast team once again. And then because of the situation of where we are right now for the Bulls, I do think that it might be a little bit of time before we actually get that big fish. And maybe it's even a couple years away and it comes to a point where the Magic, things aren't working out. Maybe we can make a play at like Paolo Banchero. You know, maybe at this point he's a solidified all-NBA level player. I still have faith in him. I know he hasn't had a great year this year, but I mean, we've seen that he could definitely be an all-star in this league and, you know, probably even taking it to the next step of superstar. So that's probably the order I would have, like looking at Giannis first. If not, maybe seeing what we could get with Kawhi. That's a little bit more of a, I guess, you know, pipe dream scenario. I do think like Giannis for now. If we don't get Giannis now, maybe someone like Paolo Banchero years down the line, because I think a lot of the other young stars who are playing so well already, like they're kind of set, right? Here's an interesting one from Hoops Focal. He wanted me to give one player from every decade that's underrated. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about each player just because there's 9 different decades to get through right now. But starting from top to bottom, I'll start with 40s. I'll say Alex Groza. This guy was probably the first great scorer the NBA has actually seen. Like, people talk about Mikan, or, you know, some people talk about like Joe Fulks. Like, I think this guy was even a better scorer. Unfortunately, you know, we know what happened with the point shaving thing, but you know, I still think that he was a pretty solid player in his time. For the 50s, I'll say, you know, there's a couple that you can go with. Maybe like even Bob Davies or something, but I'll say Arnie Rison. You know, I think both those guys really were on the Royals in the 50s, giving them their only championship. And it was just a really weird time for the league. I feel like people need to respect Arnie Rison for what he did during that time. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people too, like he's often mentioned by some of the guys from like the 70s, 80s, 90s. But it seems like in recent years, he's kind of like lost his mojo in those conversations, which is unfortunate. But that's what I would say for the 50s. For the 60s, I'll go with Walt Bellamy. You know, he's averaged like 31 points per game as a rookie, which is insane. Multiple-time All-Star in the NBA. I know he didn't have a whole lot of success, but I mean, he played on some pretty solid teams, like played on the Bullets early on. And, you know, I think there was some overlap there with Earl the Pearl Monroe. And then he went to the Hawks with Pete Maravich and Lou Hudson and everything. So, you know, he was on some solid teams himself. And I mean, definitely a force to be reckoned with. The 1970s, this is when I say pretty often downtown Fred Brown. I mean, the guy was a scoring leader in the playoffs for 1 year. He won a championship. He was an all-star at one point. Like, these were all across like multiple seasons as well. So I feel like he doesn't get the love for one of these early pioneers for shooters either. So downtown Fred Brown, Freddie Brown, however you want to call him. You know, I think he was that guy. Now let's go 1980s. I'll say Mike Mitchell. I think that, you know, he was a pretty solid, stable guy in there. He didn't really have the accolades that would make you think like, oh, well, he deserves any recognition. But I think most of his accolades that he got were in the 70s. When it came to the 80s, I know he averaged between like 23 and 19 points a game for a while, and he was around like that 7 rebounds a game average as well, on some solid teams too. I feel like when we're talking about all-time Spurs team members as well, like he's definitely in that conversation. And he wasn't too bad for Cleveland either. So I'll say Mike Mitchell. For the 90s, I'll say Detlef Schrempf. I mean, this is a guy who's a 3-time All-Star, made it for 2 different teams as well. And I feel like, you know, he didn't really have any weakness in his game. I mean, maybe his biggest weakness would have, I guess, been his defense, but even his defense wasn't really that bad. Pretty much, he was like a Swiss Army knife type of guy at the time. In my opinion, probably should make the Hall of Fame at one point or another just because of everything he's accomplished in basketball. But I guess that's a conversation for another day. As for the 2000s, I was thinking about a lot of these because this is probably the most interesting era for, you know, I guess pop culture for the NBA. And I ended up going with Andre Miller. I feel like Andre Miller was, never an all-star, but he averaged like 15, 7, and 4 probably for like the entirety of the decade. I feel like people look at him and they're like, he wasn't a great jump shooter. He had that real slow release, but he still got the job done. And it's unfortunate he didn't have like more playoff runs like that, because I do feel like he was one of the guys that you'd feel confident running your offense. So I would say Andre Miller's my 2000s guy. We got a couple more 2010s. I got Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, probably will go down as the only guy to make the 50-40-90 club and not make the Hall of Fame. I guess we still got to see what's in store for Con Knipple for the rest of the season and then his career, because it's really early for him. But Malcolm Brogdon, like, he was a guy who was the perfect prototype of a guy you'd want probably playing off the ball. He could defend at a high level. He often elevated his game, like in big game moments too. You could think about it with the Celtics. Like, he had that moment again in the series against the Sixers where it felt like Philly was going to win and he basically turned up. I think of moments like with the Pacers when he was big for them. You think of that Bucks run as well, like when they got to the conference finals and then he got hurt. That's the thing. He just had so many injuries, and even sometimes when he was coming off an injury, he still played pretty solid. I just feel like he got a raw deal, because the Bucks got rid of him a little too early. They should have kept him over Eric Bledsoe. They ultimately got rid of Bledsoe, and then the Bucks still won. And then I feel like he would have won with the Celtics too if they just kept him that year. That just felt like poised to be their year. So this guy could be a 2-time champion, probably should be an all-star like 1 or 2 seasons. I think the year with Indiana definitely, and you could even argue that 50-40-90 year with the Bucks as well. So I think he's kind of similar to Andre Miller in the sense of like he elevates in big games. He's a guy that you feel safe with on the court. The only difference is I think as a catch and shoot guy, Malcolm Brogdon was like way better than Andre Miller. Andre Miller just really didn't have that shooting ability, but I think they're both underrated. And then the one I'll say for the 2020s, I know he's been an all-star a couple times, but I think Bam, honestly, we don't really talk enough about Bam Adebayo. This is a guy who's made the finals multiple times, and in some of those playoff series leading up to, or, even you could argue in the finals, like, he was the best player on this team. Like, guy who doesn't make the all-star team every season, but he's always in the defensive player of the year running. He's always in the all defensive running. I just feel like what he does for the Heat is so impactful, and that's why teams would probably be lining up to get him if he were presented available. He might not be like the most ideal guy. Like, when you think of like stars in this league, you're probably not going to name Bam in the first like 15 or so, but I think that what he does like shouldn't be underrated. I think that Bam definitely does more than like what the average person probably gives him credit for. So there you go. There's one for every decade. Next, we got Alta Mace Pace asking me for the biggest lose-lose trade ever. I don't know if this would be the biggest lose-lose trade ever, but in terms of the big name ones, I think it's got to be up there, and it might just be the biggest. I'm thinking of 2017, that Cavs Celtics trade with Kyrie Irving and Isaiah Thomas. First of all, total bombshell of a trade because it completely caught me off guard. Never would I have thought that Kyrie would get traded to the Celtics, especially after I think he listed his teams were like the Timberwolves and the Heat, and there were a couple, I think the Spurs and the Knicks. I think those were the 4 teams that he said at that point in time. So the Celtics were not on my radar. And then also, like, especially the year, everything that was going on with Isaiah Thomas at that time, like, best season of his career, just got the team to the conference finals, everything of course that happened with his sister and everything. I would have never thought he was going to get traded at that point in time, and then they get flipped for each other. They also trade over like Jay Crowder and stuff. So the Cavs look like this super team now, but also the Celtics look kind of like a super team. It looked like it was going to be both their years to who's going to take the East, and sure enough, that first year they did meet in the conference finals, but it felt like so empty. It felt like it was missing a lot because the Cavs get rid of like all those guys on that team that they built in the summer, and then as for the Celtics, it's like no Kyrie playing, no Gordon Hayward playing, and then the year after that, it's like, well, the Cavs just completely fall off a cliff, and then the Celtics just are a dumpster fire that season, and Kyrie's gone. So it's like after 2 seasons, what seemed like it was going to be an exciting rivalry for the next 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5, like it was done in like 2 years, and we really never got that like rivalry built up, which is kind of unfortunate. But I would say that was probably the biggest lose-lose trade, especially in recent history. I got one from Isaac saying are Benny and Bobby from Dummies onto Hardwood whack for their takes? That's an interesting question. You know, I would say the safest answer to say is there's an equal level of whackness coming from everybody. I'll include myself in there too. So between the four of us, we all have our own whack takes, but yeah, that's a funny question. I'm glad you put that in there. We got Derek Holmes saying that, not really a question, but saying that Robert Horry is a Hall of Famer. It's actually funny because I did a video on this not too long ago. You guys will have to, check it out. Maybe I'll have the link in the description or at the end of this video, but Robert Horry, before I get into it or anything, I want you guys to check that out. You can see what I have to say. I'll give you about like 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. No, he's not a Hall of Famer in my opinion. And the reason is because yes, he won 7 championships on different teams. Yes, he maybe made some big plays, but he was never a star level player. I think it comes to a point where it's like, if you are a role player on every single team, I don't think I can give you the nod there. Now, talking jersey retirement for like some of those teams, maybe you could definitely get one there. I'm looking at a team like Portland. I mean, Portland retired like everyone from their championship team. So to think like whether the Rockets or the Lakers or the Spurs, maybe a little bit less likely for the Lakers because they have so many, but maybe one of those other teams, because I mean, he obviously hit some big shots all along the way. I think of that one shot for the Spurs in 2005 against the Pistons. Like, if one of those teams wanted to retire his jersey, I don't think it'd be as big of a deal, but in terms of the Hall of Fame, I don't think so. My guy NBA Real Talk said, should they do something about this gather step? Great question, and I would say yes, I think that they should. It's kind of getting a little bit out of hand, especially like too, not just the gather step, but like when people do like a step back, and I see so many times now where it's like people get like that extra step, like when they're having the ball like right here, they'll go like 1, 2, 3 and then go up, and it's like, yes, you do get like that gather step, but it never was as apparent as it is today. And this is why I say too, like when we look at older eras, a lot of people say, well, the dribbling wasn't as good back then, and you can see because they were all dribbling like this. Well, part of it too is because there was a lot more strict rules on dribbling back then. Like you couldn't like do like dribbles like this, you know what I mean? Like you couldn't have like a flow with your dribble, as Paul George put it, for instance. Like there's like a rhythm to dribbling and everything, or a rhythm to the game. Like you couldn't do that back then. Otherwise you're gonna get called for a carry, or you would get called for a travel if you tried something like this. So I think that the gather step in itself, it's not something that if you take it away, it's going to take away that creativity. I just feel like some people just use it to their advantage, and sometimes it almost feels like, the refs don't really have a backbone when it comes to that, because they're not calling it. They see that extra step and they're like, oh, well, maybe something weird just happened. No, call it as you see it. Like, and also too, later in games, they never want to call a travel. They never want to call a carry or anything like that. And I think that's a problem, like with the officiating today. So I would say, yes, it's definitely a problem. How are they going to fix it? I think that just the refs need to be a little bit more conscious of when it actually happens. Stop giving the players the benefit of the doubt of, oh, maybe like something weird just happened, or oh, I guess like I saw it wrong or something. I watched a game the other day where every official called Christian Brown for a 2-point shot, and it was a 3-point shot. Every official on the court, they all held out a 2 as soon as he shot it, and then they gave him 3 points about a minute later. How are you missing that? How is everyone so confidently wrong? That's the issue. Next one we got is from Conspiracy Zone. Do I support the Seattle and Las Vegas expansion? Absolutely. Yes, I do. First of all, Seattle definitely needs a team. It's been way too long that the Supersonics have been out of the mix, and if they do get back a team, they're going to need to retain their Seattle Supersonics history, which from what I saw, I think a year ago or so, the Thunder said that they would give up that history, which is, respect there. Plus, I mean, they got a championship of their own now, so it's like both of them could have a win. There you go. But also, like, I just feel like if they bring them back, I hope they don't like totally change like the color schemes or the logo, or like you can make some alterations for sure, but don't make it too crazy or anything like that. And then Vegas, yeah, maybe a little bit more desirable, just because it's like, well, they've never had an NBA team, but they've done pretty well like with other sports in recent years too, like with hockey and with football and everything. Like they've gotten a decent fan base, and even with the in-season tournament, I mean, they get a decent amount of people who go there, but also like, you know, I think in recent years when they started doing it more, it was starting to dwindle down because they don't have a team. If they did have a team, you know, maybe you would have even more of a, you know, that it factor, right? Getting to the next one, it's kind of similar on the same theme here, but from Dennis, why so long with the expansion, and when will expansion come? When will expansion come? I'm hoping it'll happen this summer. It seems like the NBA, like board of directors and the CBA, they're coming to a closer agreement that it's going to be this summer. And then why it's taken so long, hard to answer that really. I mean, I feel like Adam Silver is just like not paying attention to like what the league needs. We haven't had expansion since 2004, and it's like, well, yeah, they went about 9 or 10 years at the end of David Stern's tenure without a team, but also like during his tenure, they brought in like the Heat, the Magic, the Timberwolves, the Grizzlies, the Raptors. I mean, like so many other teams came into the mix during his time as the commissioner. We haven't had one team added since Adam Silver started in like 2013, 14-ish. So that's like a dozen years, you know what I mean? So we need teams. It's definitely gotten to a point where people want to say, oh, the talent is better now than it ever was before. Whether you agree with that or not, that's something that's being said by a decent amount of people right now. If that is the case, then why are we not adding in more teams? Like it just doesn't really make sense. So hopefully this summer we can finally, you know, close the door on it, at least for a little bit. And then maybe a couple more years down the line, we start looking at other cities that could deserve a team. And my thing that I've said for the longest is if you have 32 teams, I would like to see, you know, 4 divisions of 4 teams in each conference, kind of like the NFL. And then make it so your top team in each division, all 4 of them make the playoffs. And then the next 4 best records also make it as well. So yeah, I think that would just create a lot more division rivals, which is what we need. This one's from my friend Monica, who said, who should I bet on? It's actually funny because I've been helping her with like bets and stuff, which not promoting it by any means on my channel, but you know, just to answer the question, I feel like never count out Kawhi. You know, always put your money on Kawhi, especially going over for points, because he's only had like, I don't think he's had a game under 20 points in the last 3 months. Like that's some king stuff right there. King of LA, as I call him. I think another one that would be a safe bet recently would just be like Knipple 3-pointers, especially since All-Star break, because you know, my guy Donovan Mitchell was leading the league in 3-pointers made by All-Star break, and it's hard to even tell right now because Knipple's been on a roll lately, and now he has like I think a 15 3-pointer lead. And yeah, Donovan Mitchell's missed a couple games since then, but like every game it feels like Knipple's making like at least 5 or 6. So I feel like putting down like at least 3 3-pointers for him, at least maybe 25 points for Kawhi, and then maybe another sleeper one could be like Isaiah Collier with assists. He did the same thing kind of last year where he started racking up a lot of big assist games near the end of the year when all hope was lost for the Jazz. So I would say like at the very least he should definitely get 4 assists, but even like betting for 6, like putting your money on 6 of them a game would I think that could pay out pretty well. So those are just some picks that if you see their team playing, if you see their name on the sheet, I would probably you know, roll with one of those and invest in that. My guy Eamon Castles from the Castles Cast told me to rank the top 3 prospects for this year. So interesting question, because this is probably the first collegiate question we got. And of course there's, you know, Cam Boozer, there's Darren Peterson, and there's AJ Dybonsa. If I had to rank them 1 to 3, I would probably say AJ Dybonsa 1, Cam Boozer 2, Darren Peterson 3. I do think that the one thing with Darren Peterson is it seems like he's, you know, more of a guard than the other guys, but at the same time he's not really the playmaker that either the other two are. And as for AJ Dybonsa, I feel like he just has that athleticism edge. Now I think these other guys still are pretty solid athletes, but at the same time, like Dybonsa probably does it at the highest level. All these guys can shoot. And also for Darren Peterson, I think that he is just, you know, he's had his like injury concerns as well. So when you factor all that together, Cam Boozer seems like a pretty safe pick as well. And even though I have him number 2, there might be a little bit more risk taking AJ Dybonsa or Darren Peterson. I think maybe Cam Boozer might be the safest pick here, but I think think that there's a little bit more upside with Dybantsa, and I think all these guys will probably be all-stars in the NBA at some point. So I don't want to like shade one over the other, but at the same time, I think that, you know, Dybantsa 1, Cam Boozer 2, Darren Peterson 3, that's probably what I'm going to roll with. We got one from Chris Jordan asking me my favorite number 17 ever. It's an interesting question. I would have thought for something like this, maybe I'd be asked like number 23 or 24 for Super Mario Hoops 24. 17 though. I'll give you 2. I think in terms of long-standing history, I think you got to say probably the greatest even 17. I'd have to go with Hondo, John Havlicek. You know, and that's also like a player that my dad, it was one of his favorite players, and same with my grandpa as well. So, you know, definitely got to give respect to Hondo there. I know he had like obviously big moments with helping the Celtics win those championships, winning the finals MVP in 74 and getting that crucial steal. And, you know, there's just so many plays where I feel like he made a difference. There's a big reason why a lot of people put him top 20 all time in NBA history. And I would be even one of those people to say that. So I would have him. And then if you want to do a more recent player, you know what? I'll say Jeremy Lin. I think that Jeremy Lin, especially during Linsanity time, that was one of the most fun moments of NBA history that I feel like we just can't forget about what Jeremy Lin did. Yes, it was only a couple weeks. Yes, people are going to be like, well, what was really the purpose? But if you were there for Linsanity, you know how important that was. So that's why I'm going to say John Havlicek and Jeremy Lin. Gooser saying, have I played NBA Street V3? This is a great question. I unfortunately have not, which is kind of sad. But in case you don't know, this is pretty much the only game that crosses over the NBA and Mario characters on the GameCube edition. So you could play as like Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach in a 3v3 mode. Like that's like bringing the best of both worlds together. Like my love for Mario, my love for the NBA, put them together and call it a 10 out of 10 video game. So I gotta play at some point or in time. You know, I gotta get my hands on the game. So we'll try to make it happen sometime soon. But as of right now, I have yet to. But that's a great question. My guy Steph Trillbucket, he's asking me about a player or team that I've changed my opinion on. This is a pretty good question. I'm not gonna give a team, but I'll give 2 players who I've changed my opinion on for good. I would say Josh Giddey. I think when he first came to the Chicago Bulls, I was like, why are we making this trade? It felt like we kind of just gave up on Alex Caruso for nothing, you know, like a straight up like kind of 1 for 1. It was like, those trades are usually dicey and it feels like we should have got more back. Even though Caruso did help them win a title last year, I still think that Josh Giddey, he's proven to me that he can be an all-star in this league, even though he wasn't this year. And I feel confident in us building around him. We just got to put the pieces together to support him. But I think he can be like that guy that, okay, we can construct a team around him and, you know, get somewhere. He's still pretty young. You know, he's only like, I think 24 years old, 23, 24. So defensively might need to get a little bit better, but I think he's one of those guys who does just about everything offensively. And I'm pleased with how he's been so far for us. Change my opinion for worse, Zion Williamson. I mean, I was a huge Zion fan. I wouldn't say like super huge, but I mean, I always supported Zion like as soon as he got drafted. First couple years, I thought he was going to be pretty good, but I don't know if it's just because he got lazy or just because he's been injured, but it just feels like there's too many games nowadays. Maybe he's unmotivated being in New Orleans, but he's just kind of going through the motions. Like there's games where he has like 4 points or 6 points. He's only taking a couple shots. He's only playing like 10 minutes sometimes. Like if you're Zion, you cannot do that, especially when I see other guys who, if they're on bad teams and they're young guys, like they're still showing out like night after night. So I feel like he's just kind of been stuck in this route where he just hasn't really shown any growth in the past like 4.5 seasons. He's never played a playoff game, which is really disappointing because the guy was compared to like LeBron, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, maybe like when he first got drafted. Like all these guys have made the finals, you know, all those guys won MVPs in the NBA. So I thought he'd be on that pedestal, and he really hasn't even been close. I mean, he's been an all-star a couple times, but he hasn't really even been close to that level. He's never been a top 10 player in the NBA. So I would say I've been a little bit disappointed with him. That those are the 2 players I think the opinions have changed on, though. Josh Giddey for better, and then Zion probably for worse. And then the last question I got on here from WB Flash, who is the MVP this season? I think this is a great one to end off on because, you know, it's kind of like encapsulating everything. If you're asking me, based on everyone who is currently eligible for the award, my MVP is Nikola Jokic. I just feel like the things that he's doing this season, I know that since he came back from his injury, like they've been losing a couple games, but also like, you know, they've been kind of trying to get their groove back. But he was so good, like even before the injury as well, and he's still dropping like triple-double after triple-double. He's the most important offensive player probably since Michael Jordan, I would say. You know, like everything he does, like yes, defensively, he might not be like a Dikembe Mutombo by any means, but I do feel like what he does for this team and setting people up to the capacity where they haven't been before, it's like, it can't go understated. I do feel like the Thunder have shown, even without Shea, that they can like get it done at a little bit better rate than the Nuggets. And I just feel like Jokic's production, like there's only a handful of players who can maybe even compete with it, whether it's Shea, whether it's Luka, but I mean, I feel like he just does a lot more. You look at plus minus, like the team is way better when he's on the floor than when he's off the floor. And you could say what you want about defense, but at the same time, it's like if you're outplaying your opponents by that rate when he's on the floor, how can he not be the MVP, you know, as opposed to when he's off of it? Now I know both those guys too are in a weird pickle when it comes to qualifying for the games played. And so for that reason, maybe both of them don't even qualify between Jokic or Shea. Maybe Luka doesn't qualify. Maybe Wemby doesn't qualify. You know what I mean? So now it opens up an interesting door. And I feel like the likeliest scenario of who they could actually give it to then might be Cade Cunningham. I mean, the Pistons are the #1 seed. He's having a really solid year, averaging like 25, like 9 and 5 a game. He's a solid, actually better than solid. I'd say like an elite defender. He won't make all defensive, but he's definitely in that class. He's gotten better as a jump shooter. Like there's really no holes in his game. I would say he's probably one of, if not the most well-rounded players like in the game in terms of like, there's no like flaw that I guess sticks out more than the others. Like it seems like everything's like right around the same area. You know what I mean? If it's not him, I mean, I do think Donovan Mitchell should be in the conversation. I know that they're probably not going to give it to him. I think also other guys, like then you'd have to start considering Jaylen Brown. I didn't say Anthony Edwards because I know he's also kind of on the fence with that games played thing, but you know, as of right now, he also deserves consideration. Obviously Kawhi, but the Clippers are not that high that he's not going to win the award actually. And then maybe like Jalen Brunson could be in that mix as well. But I would say Jokic should be 1. You know, Shea and Luka are going to be 2 and 3, like right behind him. If those guys do miss their games, you start looking at Cade Cunningham, you start looking at Donovan Mitchell, you start looking at Jaylen Brown, and yeah, just like, I guess like seeing where you could go. I mean, Kawhi's going to probably have the games played this year. It's just unfortunate with the Clippers and how they're doing, but yeah. So those are the community questions. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I figured I'd do something like this. I know it's like the weirdest part of the season where it's like playoffs aren't quite here yet and we're trying to find things to, you know, spice up the season. So I feel like this was something different I've never done before. Let me know if you'd want me to do something like this again. Maybe even at the end of the season we could do that. But yeah, until then, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.